What's going on, everybody? It's your man Enir Nabu. Holla at your boy. Coming at you with a little more Behold a Pale Horse theater. You could take this as the second segment. Was watching a jump off tonight on the History Channel about the apocalypse. I figured I would give you guys a little bit of information, as I always do, from one of my favorite books of all time. So, let me just read off some quick stuff for y'all. If you believe it, if you don't believe it, I don't really give a fuck. But this is basically what I consider to be factual information. So either you believe or you don't believe, but you best believe that if the people that control everything believe this stuff, then it might as well be true. Alright, so we gonna get it poppin' like this. We're gonna talk about the baby boom. This is basically the era that took place after World War II. So I'm gonna get into some reading real quick. Try to follow along if you can. Alright. This point in history, the baby boom, was the only point in history up until this point that the birth rate exceeded the death rate, and the world's population started to double, and this took place between 1957 and 1990. They did several studies. The people in power did several studies to figure out what was happening. They figured we were on our way to overpopulation. You never heard of the Club of Rome, but it's an organization that basically decides the health practices of the planet. So basically, the first study, they decided the first thing they wanted to do was lower the birth rate. And the second thing they wanted to do was increase the death rate. They figured that people were populating the planet way too much. Millions of soldiers returned home from the war. The soldiers returned to find lonely, eager women, their wives that they left before the war. The greatest coupling in the history of the human race occurred. The result was everyone being born between 1941 and 1955. That means all the parents, all the adults on Earth now, they all came from the baby boom era. So the people in power decided to start a study to figure out how they can stop this overpopulation that they were estimating was going to take over the planet by the time the year 2000 came around. To lower the birth rate, several programs were put in motion. The first was the development of the positive birth control method. Using mechanical, the diaphragm and the condom, and using chemical, foam and birth control pills, and medical, which is sterilization, abortion, and hysterectomy procedures. Basically taking out your uterus, women. These were developed and implemented to stop the overpopulation process. The women's liberation movement was started with a demand for free abortions, using pro-choice as the rallying cry. Homosexuality was encouraged. Gay liberation was born. Homosexuals don't have children as far as they were concerned. Zero population growth became a hot subject at every cocktail party. Individual freedom, the heat of the moment, religion, and the old blue laws sabotaged all these efforts. And while zero population growth became a reality in some areas, population increased rapidly in other areas on the planet. The only alternative left to the world's ruling elite was to increase the death rate. This was a difficult thing to do, since nobody wanted to pick out people from a crowd and line them up for execution. Neither did they relish the possible consequences of an enraged public upon discovering that the people in power decided to systematically murder the planet. Of course, a short but very deadly global war using nuclear weapons was also ruled out. Actually, they were pretty close to coming to that term. Anybody remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? Kennedy? Yeah. So they figured back in 1957, what's a way we can depopulate the planet? Perhaps something that could be blamed upon Mother Nature. What was needed was the bubonic plague. You remember the bubonic plague took place in the 1300s, killed about 100 million people. They needed something like a natural disease, so the answer came from the Club of Rome. Dr. Aurelio Pesci of the Club of Rome, advocated they can come up with a microbe that could attack the autoimmune system and render the development of a vaccine impossible. The orders were given to develop the microbe and to develop a prophylactic and a cure. The microbe could be used against the general population, and it would be introduced by a vaccine. The prophylactic was to be used by the ruling elite, the people in power, so they wouldn't catch anything. The cure would have to be administered to the survivors when it was decided that enough people died. The cure would be announced as newly developed when in fact it existed from the beginning. You can't create a man-made disease without having a vaccine first. That's just how it works. Ask a scientist, they'll tell you. So let's see, they move on to this Global 2000 report, and they get it to the president. This is directly from Dr. Aurelio Pesci from the Club of Rome. So, since large populations had to be decimated, the ruling elite decided to target the undesirable elements of our society. Specifically targeted were the Black, Hispanic, and homosexual populations. The poor homosexuals were encouraged on one hand and scheduled for extinction on the other. The African continent was infected via smallpox in 1977 via the smallpox vaccine. That's how they had to introduce the disease, through the vaccine. Who the fuck would line up for a disease injection? But people line up quick for a vaccine injection. The US population was infected in 1978 with the hepatitis B vaccine by Dr. Wolf Simusnis, an ex-roommate of Pope John Paul II. Look it up, it's not a lie. So between 1978 and 1979, and March 80 to October 81, hepatitis B vaccine trials began. They were conducted by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and began in New York and San Francisco. Basically, the Center of Disease Control unleashed the AIDS virus, HIV virus, on the American people. The gay population was infected. The ads for participants specifically asked for promiscuous homosexual male volunteers for the vaccine. Whatever causes AIDS was in that vaccine. So basically, the people in power dictated that this new vaccine, these vaccinations, be given out to third world countries. And if third world nations refused, civil war usually broke out. And the rebels in these civil wars in Central America were trained by the CIA, the USA. That's why many more civilians, especially young, fertile females in Central American countries, were killed more than even soldiers during these civil wars. Places like El Salvador, Nicaragua, so on and so on. These are also countries that took on loans from the IMF and World Bank. And if these third world countries didn't agree with these policies that were handed to them by these organizations, civil war, overthrow, a coup, a revolt, anything to wipe them out. So what am I saying? I'm basically telling you, behold a pale horse. You know, one of the revelations in the New Testament. It's supposed to be about a plague being loosened on the planet. It's supposed to be about death. It's supposed to be about depopulating the planet. All of it began way back in the day, but it really took motion after World War II, when the baby boom took over. Do the math. The scientists and the people in power do. That's how they decide who has to go and who has to stay. So don't be signing up for free vaccines. Don't let your colleges tell you you have to get vaccinated. You do what the hell you want to do. And you believe what you